First question, how does the Russian Foreign Ministry assess the statement by Secretary of the Security Council of Ukraine Alexei Danilov that President of Belarus Alexander Lukashenko can take part in the negotiations between Moscow and Kiev? Can such a statement be interpreted as a recognition that the international prestige of the Belarusian president has grown even in the eyes of Kiev politicians? Let me split this question into two blocks. First, I will talk about negotiations and mediation. What concerns the president of Belarus directly? I will say more about this. When making statements about possible negotiations between Moscow and Kiev, for some reason, for an absolutely incomprehensible reason, the Kiev regime forgets that it was Kiev, that, at the behest of the West, unilaterally interrupted the negotiation process in March 2022. Later, on September 30th of the same year, Kiev legitimized this by adopting an appropriate legislative act. Since then, we have not heard any constructive from the Kiev regime regarding the resumption of the negotiation process. On the contrary, there were only requests, cries and demands for the West to provide more weapons. And all kinds of insults and aggressive statements were made by them against Russia. Everything that was said about the peace by those who saw themselves as a mediator, or who were ready for this role, the desires of caring people, they blacked out from the information field and blocked with their aggressive statements. I'll give an example. It seems to me that Ukrainian officials are competing in Russophobia and putting forward initiatives divorced from reality, like the notorious peace formula that we talked about today, which has nothing to do with the settlement of the conflict. At the same time, they reject the mediation initiatives proposed by other countries. I will give a few more examples. On May 13th of this year, after meeting with the Pope, Zelensky said in an interview with RAI television that this is a direct quote from Zelensky. With all due respect to His Holiness, we do not need intermediaries. Zelensky said, we need a just peace. This is the question of intermediary functions. On May 30th, he spoke about China's peace initiative. Quote, regarding China's own peace initiative, we made it clear, Zelensky said, that we appreciate any efforts of other countries to achieve peace, but our own peace formula, our initiative is fundamental. That is, he repeatedly said, that only their peace formula, which is generally divorced from reality, has the right to exist. Everything else does not interest them. The Danilov you mentioned went even further. On May 17th, he said literally the following, a direct quote, I want to remind individual international politicians that in relations with Moscow, Danilov said, weapons are the best method of diplomatic communication. End of quote. What follows from this? It follows from this that the Kiev regime does not even think about any kind of peace. Moreover, it is not allowed to do this by those who also in Washington and Brussels say that the time has not come for peace, and there is only a battlefield, and there is only war to the last Ukrainian. This is the answer to the first part of your question. As for the role of the president of our ally Belarus, it seems to me that the president of Russia has already appreciated it. He spoke about it publicly. It's hard to add anything here. If we take the protocol and functional duties, then this is not my level to evaluate the presidents of other countries. Moreover, this assessment has already been given by the leadership of Russia. But I will allow you to make an exception in this case, and I will say that without any doubt Alexander Lukashenko is an outstanding statesman. He is a skilled politician and diplomat, a person who is able to quickly solve many of the most complex problems and non-trivial tasks, and, of course, he could make a significant contribution to the achievement of peace agreements. But if the Kiev regime wanted it, which in fact does not want it, but let me remind you that behind these words and behind this recognition of the role of Alexander Lukashenko, are his deeds. I'll remind you what it is. For example, in February-March 2022, it was on his instructions that all conditions were created for holding Russian-Ukrainian negotiations on the Belarusian site. As you remember, these are the Minsk agreements. I am not talking about hospitality and assistance in organizing the hours-long negotiating marathon when the well-known package of measures was signed. This is February 2015. Therefore, repeatedly Belarus and directly the president of Belarus showed hospitality, true effective mediation, goodwill and desire for global peace, and assistance in establishing it to those who needed it. All this happened repeatedly, therefore, it is all confirmed by deeds. So, do you have any more questions? Thank you. Yes, we have 2 more questions. Yes, please. Second question. Deputy Permanent Representative of Russia to the UN Maria Zabolotskaya said that the U.S. intelligence services are massively attempting to recruit Russian diplomats. Which of the recruitment methods are used most often during your work? How often did they try to recruit you? They didn't try to recruit me. They did a lot of nasty things, sanctions, various other things, informational materials, and support for those who threatened me. I mean the Kiev regime, the Maratovets website, and so on. But it didn't work out what you're talking about. As for methods, that is, there are all methods, traditional and non-traditional. We talked about this very often. Over the past year and a half, all this has intensified, although it began long before that. These are their so-called approaches to Russian diplomats, which are carried out by American intelligence services. Moreover, all this is of some kind of inhuman nature, because they use personal data. They use the topics of family and children, the state of health. In this sense, a huge number of methods have already been applied by them, which are beyond the scope of all. That was called the traditional methods of approaches. Recently, they have mastered other methods. You will probably be surprised, but, for example, in the countries of the European Union, they do this at NATO's suggestion. Accordingly, the United States of America also has a hand in this. In ideological terms, they are number 1 here. Where there should be advertisements, they put up advertisements not of an advertising nature, but of a recruiting nature, indicating telephone numbers. It is like such fascist leaflets, like, Russian Ivan, give up. You can cooperate with us. You will receive a jar of jam and a pack of cookies for this. Moreover, they also use more non-trivial things. Computer capabilities, the internet in order to send relevant recruitment offers to the mail of employees. They use even more illegal actions, such as hacker attacks on the websites of our foreign missions, where they place relevant ads, and so on. I mean, it all started a long time ago. In fact, it was part of Washington's destruction of our bilateral relationship. We've seen a lot here, but the Russian ambassador to the United States, Mr. Antonov, spoke a lot about this. We have published a lot of materials on this subject. Therefore, yes, here the Americans are smart, and, of course, I can say that all this goes along with intimidation, with psychological pressure. They think it should work in conjunction with the blocking of bank accounts, with the blocking of travel opportunities, with the conditions they impose on family members, with visa denials, with the creation of enormous difficulties for the performance of functional duties. Unfortunately, our embassies are being attacked with aggressive actions. We also talked about this. They threw Molotov cocktails at some of our embassies. They tried to take them by storm. They broke into houses, and so on. That is, of course, all this goes together to create a destabilizing environment during which to implement a recruiting approach.